There we go. Now I've unmuted the microphone. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the second Argo Workflows community meeting of 2020. In the last meeting, we did some demo of new 2.5 features, and today we're going to talk a bit about what's coming up soon. So thank you for joining us today. For those people who are not familiar with Argo Workflows is a container native workflow engine. So what that means is it effectively runs workflows on Kubernetes, and it's quite popular within the ML and AI community. So we invariably end up talking about stuff like that. Today in the meeting, there'll be myself, Alex from Intuit. We've also got a couple of my colleagues here to demonstrate a couple of new features. And Sam Elder is also going to talk a bit about the stuff that he's been using Argo for today. So I'm looking forward to that. We've got a document which I am sharing on the screen. Please do add yourself to this document if you're at the meeting. We didn't do this last time, but I'd like to do it this time. I just want to check something maybe I should have done at the beginning of the meeting. Can people who are online, Michael or Sam, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
That's a yes. I got a yeah. Thank you very much. Okay. If you've got any questions during the meetings, just drop them into the chat and somebody in here will read your question out and whoever's doing it will ask about it. Feel free to ask questions at any point. And just a final note is we are recording this and we'll share that recording later on YouTube for everybody in the community to hear. And so we tend to get quite a few people who watch that video as well. Okay, so I think we're probably ready to go in to do some of the demos of new features coming in v2.6. And so the first feature is going to be demoed by Derek. Derek, you ready?
Oh, yeah.
You give me a thumbs up. So I'm just going to mute myself and I'm going to turn off my audio as well.
Can you guys hear me? No.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Okay, so we have heard a lot of times from this community that people label your workflows and want to use label to filter your workflows on the UI. And now the feature is in 2.6 on the UI. So let's get started. I'm starting the proxy to my testing cluster. And this is the new UI will be released in 2.6. And here on the workflow list page, we have a new panel on the left. We used to have a namespace filter and a face filter on the top right. And right now, since we're adding label filters, so we move all the filters together here, and then you can do your namespace, label, or face, or even you can search a specific workflow. I think you guys already have been familiar with namespace and face filter. So for label filter, if you click on the label filter field, and then it pops up a drop down, and then shows all the available filters on all the available labels for the existing workflows, and then you can easily pick one. So for example, I have some of the workflows has a label like sleep and 6 day. If I click it and then choose a workflow here, and if I click the cross and then just clean up the filter, and then if I do like sleep 120 and then it shows the workflows has level sleep equal 120. And right now, I'm going to create a new workflow. Submit. I have a simple workflow for testing. It's like sleep seconds. By default, it's like sleep 60 seconds. Right now, I give a parameter, say, hey, I want to sleep. Three minutes. Sorry. And then I'm gonna label this filter, label this workflow. On 80. All right, and then when I click the field and then you choose sleep 180 level here, and I click it, it shows that the workflow I just created is still in running status. And I think the feature is quite straightforward, and then you can try it out by yourself. And then we also add similar features to the archive workflow list page. And that's it. Okay.
Remute yourself, and then Simon, I think you're next. Oh, Bala's next. My apologies. Sorry, Bala. No problem. Just always get me going.
Okay.
One sec, there's a quick question.
Okay.
Can you also filter in the CLI?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, you can do it. That's a default behavior in the CLI. You can use the label selector to filter it out.
Yeah. Of course, we built the UI based on the canonized
Okay. Hi, everybody. Are you guys able to hear me?
Yes. There's something in the chat. Yes. Good
Okay.
stuff.
Perfect. Hi, I'm Bala from Intuit. I'm working on the Argo workflow last 1 year. I'm going to demo that submittable workflow template. So the use case of the submittable workflow template is define once and execute multiple times. So you guys know that we introduced that workflow template on 2.4, which can be only referred in that workflows. So now you can directly run workflow template as a executable, which will automatically create a workflow and submit it into Argo. So demo that. I have a sample workflow template, which has two templates, whale say and cow say template. I can just go into create those templates. So now the workflow template is created. So suppose if I want to execute the definition of the workflow template, I can just do that Argo submit from resource. That's a recently added one. Workflow template. Then the name. So the workflow template spec has been replaced to that workflow spec so that you can have like an entry point and arguments. So if I submit now, it will take a default entry point and default arguments. You can see in the UI. It's just running. Oh, I shut down it. Sorry. So you can see that that was executed. Will say hello world. Suppose if I want to execute another template, you can just update the entry point. Dash dash point equal to cows template. If we go back, we executed, you can see that cows C. And the same thing, that existing video, you can update the parameters like a P. Message equal to welcome. You can see that the parameter is automatically updated, and the workflow template definition is submitted as a workflow, then it's executed. Yep, that's it. So, do you guys have any question or anything?
I don't have any questions in the chat at the moment. Oh,
nope. Thank you, guys.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Bala, for doing that. Are you muted?
Yeah,
Am I muted?
I'm
in that case, now I'm unmuted. Okay, great stuff.
Sec.
Oh, we have a question?
Does it just convert it to a workflow kind behind the scenes?
Yes.
Okay. I love these yes questions with just a yes as an answer. That's really good. Rather than, it depends on even things. Okay, thank you very much, Bala. Okay, so
Yep. I'm replying that.
oh, we got another question?
Yep. Is the generated name the same as name with a dash appended?
Yes, it will take that template name with a dash.
Okay. Thank you very much, Bala, for that. Okay,
Another
so
quick question.
oh, another question. Oh, okay.
Is there any way to specify template versions with some description?
Template versions, no, not yet.
Not yet. Is this something we should have an issue for, or?
The template version in the description, with some descriptions.
We can come back.
I'll take it offline.
Offline. Okay.
I'll take it offline.
I'm going to hold my tongue for 3 seconds, Danny, while.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe we should pause for 30 seconds.
Okay, I think we're good. Okay, thank you. So those are the two feature previews. Two feature previews we have from coming up in Argo Workflows v2.6. We're going to do some kind of slightly different stuff now. So one of the features we've got coming up is the ability to report custom step-level metrics from this, and we actually want to get a community feedback. So I'm going to pass over to Simon, because he's going to share some stuff with us on this.
Hello, everyone. My name is Simon, and I am working on custom and step-level metrics, which has been a feature that has been requested from the community. First, I'd like to point out that we have an RFC design doc on this issue, which is 2203. So most of what I'm going to say today, you can actually read the reasoning behind on this doc. But to make this doc a long story short, essentially the way metrics work on workflows right now is kind of an anti-pattern of how they are supposed to work. So right now, metrics, in case you're not aware, just sort of report what's on your Kubernetes, your kubectl workflow resources. And the reason why that's not particularly useful is because you can just query those resources and doesn't really give you any new information. And not only is it not useful, but on top of that, it's not how Prometheus is supposed to report metrics. You're supposed to just give a snapshot of metrics at a certain time as opposed to just a status of a state. So with that in mind, we decided to sort of refactor metrics. So changes will be backwards compatible, but they will be the new changes will be significantly different from what is currently being offered. And just to sort of give you guys a quick overview of this, let me open up this doc. So essentially the idea of the change is to, instead of having the source of truth be all of the workflow resources you have on your cluster, we will have the source of truth of metrics be the controller, which is has several advantages. Mainly, you are now able to report very granular information doing workflow execution, as opposed to just the latent information that is stored in the resource after the fact, and others that you can read in the doc. So the way that you define metrics will also change. We will provide users with very limited workflow controller level metrics, which means that those are metrics that the controller itself will have, such as how many workflows I've run, or how many workflows of each status have been have progressed. But if you want specific metrics to your own workflows, you will have to define them. And then we have come up with a schema on how to define them. And then to show a small example of this, I'm going to open up this workflow that I have with some metrics on them. So this is the standard hello world workflow. You can see here that here's our hello world. But all of this information that you see here are our new metric definitions. So as an example, we have a duration gauge metric. So a duration gauge metric is a gauge metric, which is a Prometheus term of a metric that either goes up or down. So for example, the canonical example of this would be a temperature. So if you want to know what the temperature of your computer is, every time you check it, it's going to be different. So it's going to go up or down. And in this case, it's just the duration of your workflow. So the way we define this is we have a gauge with a value and a duration, and then we want that duration to update on real time. Another example of this is we have a histogram. A histogram is essentially a count of how many of those metrics have finished under certain parameters. We will also use a duration as an example for this, but instead of reporting it real time, we'll report it on completion. And we have a couple of bins set up for our histogram. So just to give you a quick example, I'm going to run this workflow right here. It's running, and you can see here that on my metrics page, we have updated, this gets updated with the duration of the workflow. And as soon as the workflow finishes, it gets added to our histogram. So this particular workflow ran more than the upper level 6.51 seconds. So it will get added to the catch-all infinity bucket. But if we run this again, you can see that the same metric is used for the duration. And then this one also ran, I guess they're running a bit slower than I expected, but this one also ran more than 8 seconds. So the key core idea here is that users will define their own metrics, and then Argo will simply report them. So it is the developer's responsibility to sort of understand that this duration gauge will get replaced on each run of a workflow, and then essentially puts the burden of understanding the metrics to the developers, which is good because it gives you guys more control for your own specific use cases. So this is pretty much in development right now. This was meant to be more of a pattern demonstration as opposed to a feature demonstration. So if you have any sort of ideas or any sort of thoughts on this, please reach out to me on Slack. My Slack is @Simon.
Post it in the Slack, in the chat.
Yeah, so I'll post it in here. In the Zoom, you guys should feel free to reach out. And I think that's it from my end, unless you guys have some questions that I can see. Okay. Yeah, so @Simon. I'll wait 10 seconds in case you guys are typing questions. Otherwise, we will move on.
Seconds feels like a long time, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's actually pretty short.
All right.
Okay.
So we'll move on. I'll stop sharing and mute my mic.
Thank you very much, Simon, for that. Okay, so community feedback is really important to us. It's very key in helping us determine what features we will and won't do. And it's really important if you are particularly interested in something or something's useful to you that you kind of put your hand up and say that that's something useful to you. So the next thing we have on the agenda is a use case presentation. So Sam, are you ready?
I think so. Can you hear me?
He unmuted, but now I didn't turn my microphone on, so that's probably what the issue is. Are you ready?
Okay, I'm talking. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Do you want to please take control and show us what you're going to show us?
Yes. Yeah, so I made some slides here. Just let me present those. So yeah, a little bit about me. I'm a machine learning scientist at Cubotics, and I'm going to be talking about how we use Argo pretty extensively, actually, to orchestrate scientific robots. And yeah, so Cubotics, our big idea is that we're combining robotics in the lab with machine learning and exciting new technology in that capacity to accelerate the discovery of new chemicals and new materials, and just kind of trying to automate everything. So not just the actual labware, lab operations, but also the thought processes that go involved, and that's what the machine learning is involved with. And I'm kind of like at the middle of all of that, so trying to coordinate everything. And sometimes this is dealing with people with very different expertises, chemists, developers, and then of course the actual robots in the lab. And so when we want to define a workflow, often this is basically taking some chemistry experiment, description, and turning that into something that we're actually doing in the lab to actually make a chemical. So that means the chemists are kind of the ones writing, in some sense, writing the workflow, working with me to write it. And so the goal is to make it all very parsable and understandable. And I think Argo's gone a long way in helping with that. And of course, whenever you write these workflows, you always ask about how you're going to test these things. And so that's going to be a key thing I'm going to talk about. So in the next couple slides, I'll talk about one thing that's more straightforward, and then one thing that's a little bit more out of the beaten path with regards to testing. So I'd say previously, but before version 2.4, we were generating a lot of templates. So let's say you wanted to run this particular instrument with these settings. You put that into a template, and maybe the settings would be the input parameters. Or let's say you wanted to insert this kind of recording step to record something to a database. All of these would be different little templates we were passing around. And prior to 2.4, we had to kind of have this big long footer, so to speak, of lots of these templates that would be used in the workflow, or possibly would be used in the workflow. We didn't want to have to keep track of which ones were used, in each workflow. But every time we wanted to change one of those templates, we had to go change it across all of those different files. And so workflow templates has been a lifesaver, and I mean, really just has helped us to accelerate this by externalizing those templates so they don't have to be at the bottom of every workflow file. And yeah, and then we've built that separate, and then the workflow can be a little less cluttered, and the chemists can actually, understand what's going on without having to see that big long footer of templates. It also lets us test these templates more easily. So we can write test workflows that just reference the same, those common templates, and then those performances can tell us whether those templates are working or not. And if you dealt with any physical instruments, sometimes it's working one day and not working the next day. You have to figure out what's wrong. So we really need to be testing, and testing has become like a key part of our development cycle in this capacity. So I think this is fairly straightforward. I think a lot of people are familiar with workflow templates and the ability to externalize in that fashion. But a little bit more advanced stuff is how we've kind of done integration tests with all of this. Because when you're running, some chemistry experiment, you don't necessarily want to actually run the experiment and then discover that your recording step at the end failed, and then you have to start all over again if it takes days. That's not reasonable. So you want to have some kind of like integration tests of the entire system. And to do this, I've created these kind of different modes, and I've been using namespaces for this purpose. So in this illustration, I have two modes. I have virtual and chemical modes. So in the chemical mode, I'm actually using the real templates that I want to be using. And in the virtual mode, I have these softer versions, these versions that don't actually, run our instruments, but say what they're going to do in some reporting step. And those are all having the same inputs and outputs as all of the corresponding templates on the chemical side. And so I'm able to do this using workflow templates by just having a separate template file for each of those different modes. And then because there's also still a lot of steps that are in common, both sort of above and below those, I have these base templates, and I call them integration templates that are common to the different namespaces. So in one namespace, let's say in the virtual namespace, you're going to build the base templates and then the virtual templates and the integration templates. And then correspondingly in the chemical namespace, I'm going to build the base templates, chemical templates, and integration templates. And so this is a way for me to allow for this kind of integration test, as long as you buy that there's some correspondence between the templates at the same level. These integration tests of the whole thing without actually having to run our instruments. So that's that's something I wanted to share that I thought was pretty cool, and I thought others might find some use to it. Maybe you have some like production and test kind of versions to this. There might be some similar use cases in what you guys do. Finally, I want to talk about some limitations that there could be some room for improvement here. And the first is that there's this conflict between workflow templates and global parameters. And that might be resolved in some version 2.5. I haven't obviously tested it yet; it just came out. But what you can't use these global parameters in a workflow template. It doesn't allow it, except with the one key like backdoor, which is these default values for inputs to input parameters to a template. So that's how I have to get those in there, but it leads to some extra unnecessary sort of wrapping, because I want to use a global parameter in a when template, in a conditional. I have to then make this wrapper of the entire step just to put that into an input parameter. Then and speaking of which, like all the little changes, I might want to be using different servers for different things, and so I just want to make some slight change to a template. So then I have to copy this layering of templates allows me to do that, but then I have to copy the entire template with all the other inputs and outputs with just that one little change. And so it would be, thinking in a kind of functional programming way, it would be really cool if there was some kind of like way to make operations on templates, way to define that in a way that would just say insert this particular parameter, but otherwise leave the template unchanged. And actually, I don't know exactly the specs on this, but this layered system, with all the different templates I've built, actually takes a little while to Argo template create. And I have to delete everything and create them if I'm going to make any change to this process. So maybe there could be some more robust thing going on. And I have a couple more issues at the bottom that I've raised on Argo itself that would help make all of this a bit better. So that's my overview of the ways we're using Argo workflow templates, and I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has them.
I'm just asking Danny if we have any questions. He says, "Oh no,
Yep, one.
It's one question."
But why cluster instead of monolith?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Why cluster? So the full question is IDK anything about chemical processing, but why cluster instead of monolith?
So a lot of our instruments are connected through the cloud. We have some gRPC clients and servers that we're using to contact these. So that's and eventually we also want to be in multiple locations, running some processes in one lab and then some processes in another lab. So that's why we've chosen to put things on the cluster. Is that the question I was asked? I couldn't quite tell.
We've got some more questions.
Yeah. The second question is, can you run tests under CI?
Yeah, so some tests, yes. Some tests are purely just there's some checking, to make sure it worked. Some tests we have to, like it's a test of an instrument. Did the instrument do what you wanted it to do? And so right now, we don't have like a video camera set up that we can validate that the instrument did it. We have to have a human, checking that it actually ran. So those tests can sometimes take a little while if the instrument's operation is complicated. So, but yeah, for some of the tests, I can run them like automatically as soon as I, update things. I could run them. And some tests I have to trigger it myself. And we have some regular pacing with every new kind of release of a new version of the workflow. We'll then run the whole suite of tests for anything that we're using in this workflow. So so that has to be kind of done manually. But yeah, for some things we're able to do it in a more CI fashion.
How do you deploy the CI tests? Minikube or a real cluster?
Right now it's still manual, but it's just stacking together some command line things every time you would build Argo template create and run the tests or something like that.
So would you run the tests like on your local laptop using something like Minikube or Docker and desktop, or
so we use the full cluster infrastructure when we need to test. Yeah.
Cool. Everybody thought that was really good. I really enjoyed that. It's really interesting to hear people using Argo in ways we don't expect. I never really thought you could do tests like that, so it's really interesting. There's quite a few nodding heads in this room, Sam. I can't see them.
Thank
cool.
you.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you very much for that. Okay, I'm just looking at the time. We're okay for time. I'm hoping this won't take very long. So one of the planned features for version 2.7, which I now think of as the March version, is to provide some kind of better support for running Argo workflows programmatically from different programming languages. And people typically call these things SDKs, or to teach grandma to suck eggs, software development kits. And I've been chatting to a couple of people who've already provided some SDKs in Java and Python about how we're going about do this. And I want to kind of basically just explain the current plan here and just ask people if they to get a feedback on a couple of kind of interesting points that have come up in discussion. So the plan is to basically produce some API clients using the Argo Swagger definitions. Now, prior to version 2.5, the only way to interact programmatically with Argo was actually through the Kubernetes API. And now with 2.5, we have our own Argo server, which exposes its own gRPC-based API. So the plan is to provide a Swagger-based, so therefore HTTP rather than gRPC way to interact. So my first question, 1 second. My first question is, does anybody actually want gRPC? I feel like probably HTTP-based API is probably going to meet most use cases without all the complexity that gRPC involves. That's my first question for you. The second question is about the clients themselves. So originally we talked about SDKs, but actually the plan at the moment is to provide clients. And what's the difference between a client and an SDK? Well, SDK is typically more things. A client is just one component in the SDK. So the clients will allow you to interact with the APIs, including the kind of archiving APIs and offload node status APIs, which aren't available at all via the existing Kubernetes APIs to access those. And we'll provide those clients in Java and Python. And the reason we're providing a Java SDK is because we use Java internally ourselves, so we need one. And the reason we're going to provide a Python one is because people in the community are asking for a Python SDK. Nobody's asking for SDKs in languages such as C#, Golang, PHP, JavaScript, Corba, Z, Calculus, MATLAB, or any other languages. So if you think another language is really important to you or really key to you, if that's something you'd be interested in contributing or helping with, because we're Golang experts and Java experts, but we're actually not Python experts. So, you know, it would be very easy for us to produce an SDK in our non-core languages that doesn't actually work that well. So my next question is, you know, what languages do you need or do you want? And my third question is, would you be able to help with those languages if they're not in the thing? That's really all I had to say on SDKs, and I don't see any questions or any answers appearing in the chat, but that's fine if you want to come back later on.
He's a Python expert over 20 years.
Thank you. I should mention there's a Slack channel if you're interested, called Argo SDKs, I think. I think it's Argo SDKs. You can join that if you want to join the conversation. Scala will take Java at discounted rates. Okay, fine. Well, obviously, if you use Scala, you can use Java and interop with that.
Or I could find it just YAML.
Yeah, I'm looking at saying, are you guys happy with YAML? The interesting question. I've definitely heard several people say they're not happy with YAML. I think prior to this meeting, but I think it's a good, it's a good question to ask. Okay. Cool. Thank you, guys. Please join the channel if you want to chip in and have a look and actually test out the POC clients as well. That would be useful. Also, one other question is around higher level abstractions. Obviously, the client is very closely tied to the API, but do people need higher levels of abstractions than just the HTTP client, which does talk in kind of terms of workflows and so forth, but you may require something a bit more sophisticated now, something slightly different, slightly more bespoke to your use case. Cool, thank you, guys. So I've got one more item, and then there'll be open Q&A after that if you want to ask any other questions. The other item is, we currently have a survey here. The reason we're doing a survey is kind of to take the temperature of the Argo workflows community. We kind of use that to kind of focus our energies. If something, a particular topic is important, this is a good opportunity to kind of bring that to fore. Also kind of learning about what people are doing so we can, appropriately address and index those kind of issues. So it is really important that people complete the survey because we don't really have any other way to find out what people are doing. So that is really important. We will be summarizing and publishing the results of that survey probably in a few weeks' time, so you can find out what everybody else is up to. I don't know how we'll do that, probably a PDF document or something like that. Okay, so that is kind of the end of the formal agenda. This is an open opportunity. If anybody has any questions or anything that they want to talk about, please feel free. Just unmute your microphone and ask. Or, if you don't have any questions, that's also fine as well. Maybe we should have some kind of countdown timer. Like the sound of a clock ticking away.
No, I think that might pressure people.
Oh, the one question I didn't want to get.
You pay off to get a plushie doll.
So really, this is such a hard, because they are have been very desirable, and we had to be. We did take them to KubeCon San Diego back in November, and they were very popular. We actually had to restrict them specifically to kind of committers, people who've actually contributed code changes, and people who've contributed a lot of code changes. There are a few people in the Argo community who've contributed, multiple complicated pull requests. An example would be Daisuke's workflow templates. That's a really big feature. So that's the, if you want to get one shipped over to you, then that's the kind of thing you can do. And we also have T-shirts for anybody who does that as well. Another example is an Argo CD. A guy called Jan had contributed a whole bunch of security fixes. So that, that's what you have to do. That's fine. It's quite transactional, isn't it? But that's how it is. Pete's asking, linters for workflow YAML will be helpful. What does that mean? I don't know what that means.
If there's an error
in the YAML. Do we have a linter?
We have Argo lint.
Besides Argo lint.
Yes.
No, that's Sam's response. He doesn't know about Argo lint.
Yeah, we have.
Okay. So you can send them for linting using the Argo lint command, and also there's obviously all Argo CLI commands have an API behind them as well. Anything you can do in the CLI or the UI, you can do via the APIs as well. count down from 10. Okay. Okay, well, thank you very much for everybody attending. Thank you to Derek, Bala, Simon, and Sam for doing their feature previews, the Q&As, and their demonstrations. I found that all very interesting. This will be saved and then encoded and uploaded to YouTube for people to watch later, and I'll be sharing that video link will appear in the community meeting document, and it'll also be dropped on Twitter and into the Slack channel, so you should be able to get review this later on. Okay. Thank you very much. We'll click and stop the recording, and then have a lovely day, everybody, or a lovely evening, wherever you are.